Hi, thanks for listening to me attempt to explain in 5 minutes a macroecology of global terrestrial human impacts. The map that you see here is representing HANPP around the world, human appropriation of net primary production, the amount of green growth that we take away in a given pixel in a year. I'm going to be using that quite a bit here, and I'm going to be using it in this framework that has been around for 50 years called IPAT. That's a heuristic. It's just simply the statement that impact is a function of population, affluence, and technology. As recently as 97, this was finally turned into what I would consider a macroecological framework here, which is then now able to be solved for in statistical models. So it sat dormant for some time, but when it's been used, it's always, almost always, using CO2 production as an impact and tends to subsume technology, ignore it in other words, into the residual error term. These have been random effects models based on countries as the units because that's where data, that's the scale at which data were available. And notice that these are all socioeconomic terms. There's no ecology built into here necessarily. So what I want to do is build on that framework, that analytical framework, to then go much finer scales, which is possible because lots of these estimates now available allow us to do that for the year 2000. I'm going to also include anthromes and countries, which gets us a buku of countries and anthromes to evaluate and lots of different data around the world. HANPP now being the impact means that we can include ecological effects, which perhaps extends IPAT into an IPATE, but I'm also going to be retaining technology rather than ignoring it. And I'm also upgrading the way this is analyzed by including AIC comparisons among models. I'm scaling the predictors so we have fair comparisons of effect sizes. And these are mixed effect models, which means we have a global overall mean effect as well as location-specific country and anthrome-specific estimates as well. So the reason HANPP can be considered ecologically is that we've already found that there is this consumption, if you will, relationship with the amount of available prey. Yes, I'm using this context that represents a predator functional response to try to think about HANPP, our consumption, as a function of how much available biomass exists. The scatter there is related to latitude. In ecoregions, we're going to dive deeper and try to be more explicit with climate variables in much finer grids. But so the point is that the general overall model is HANPP is a function of the classic IPAT terms, plus now inserting climate and biomass functions, allowing for some curvature in the model, and then countries and anthromes mapped here as being potential random effects. And in fact, as you may not be surprised, the AICs find that this model is retained. So we have the cool part here is we have all of these data now available at fine scales around the world to be able to conduct these models. And climate, as you would know, from WorldClim data is also available to be handled the same way. So the models simply show that the countries and anthromes are often very strong effects, as are the population and ecological effects, that functional response to biomass and climate. This model for presence and absence of HANPP is remarkably strong, whereas the quantity of HANPP, where it exists, is also modeled strongly by countries and anthromes, but again, populations and potential biomass standing out as the strong effect sizes, not as strong, not as predictive, but still for a global model, I'm kind of impressed. So we have repeated themes coming through here. One is that HANPP seems to be a pretty useful and important impact measure that has been underused in this IPAT kind of context. A macroecological predation kind of concept and population size dominate that global overall signal. The countries and anthromes capture the more local effects, if you will, the granular effects. And the macroecological update then I think is pretty useful, pretty valuable to this old construct. This has been done now at a global extent, but also at relatively fine grain. I think that's a cool enhancement of what we know about. And I think these models might be a basis for hindcasts and forecasts of these terrestrial impacts at pretty impressive fine spatial grain and global extent. Well, I hope that was interesting. Feel free to contact me if you choose to. And everybody stay healthy. And thanks for listening. Bye.